Okay. Welcome everyone to another Ask the Professionals. I'm Bree Norton, co-chair of OZeWAI, digital accessibility professional organisation running in Australia and the Asia Pacific. I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I am meeting today here in Canberra, and pay respects to the elders both past and present. And I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander peoples in attendance today. And I welcome, feel free to put in the chat your name and your role and where you're paying your respects to today. And I'm going to share a few links in the chat as we go. I'm going to gather questions. But first, I am going to move it over to Ricky to start some introductions because he's our moderator for today. Over to you, Ricky.
Lovely. Thank you, Bree. And welcome to our panelists and everybody attending. Now, I should mention that the panelists we have today, the topic of our conversation today are on accessibility for developers. So we've got three very fine representatives of the development trade. And I might get you each to introduce yourselves. So let's start with Julie Grundy. Please tell us who you are, what you do, how did you get here?
How did I get here? Oh, that's a long story. So my name's Julie, and I am the head of accessibility assessments at Intopia. And so I run or wrangle a team of people who do accessibility assessments, which might be auditing, but can also involve any kind of assessment where you're like, I need someone to give us a judgment call on this. We work with large giant corporations and little non-profits and everybody in between. Anyone who needs that. We also have other teams for research and strategy and training. But my team is about 20 people, and if you need something tested, we'll test it for you, whatever that might be. How I got here was I used to have a previous life as a front-end web developer, specializing in education and health contexts. And I was asked to do for a national project, they had the requirement that we use WCAG 1 and conform to that. And I was like, what is this? And learned a lot in a very short amount of time and loved it. And was just like, this is amazing. I can't believe that there is technology that can just read a screen to people. That's so wonderful. Why aren't we paying more attention to this? And that started my journey to learning more, doing more, and led me to where I am today. I think I answered everything. Yes, cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Julie. Yes, we'll dive deeper into some of those things as we go through this session. But for now, let's move to the next person along on my screen to introduce themselves, Mr. Eric Bailey.
Hey, y'all. I'm Eric, he, him. I'm a white man with clear plastic glasses, dark hair, and a beard, and a big nose. I work at GitHub, where I help to make the platform more accessible, notably working on Primer, the design system, as well as recently this thing called the GitHub Copilot app, which is full of LLM goodness. Very exciting, I know. I got into accessibility kind of, honestly, a lot the way Julie did, where I went to school for design. Always been really interested in like human-computer interaction, and had a job at a school where we had to produce reports for the government, and they had to be Section 508 compliant. Discovered WCAG and was like, oh my gosh, this is like a cheat sheet to make your designs usable by everybody. And here we are. So yeah, thanks for listening.
That's great. Thank you, Eric. And our third panelist for today is Mr. Lawrence Lewis.
Thanks, Ricky. My name's Lawrence Lewis. I work at Telstra alongside Bree. And how did I get into accessibility? Original thing I ever knew about accessibility, but I didn't actually know it was at the time, was I used to work many years ago in the printing industry, and I worked for a place that did large print books for low vision users, which you just, yeah, okay, that's a cool idea, but didn't really put any real thought behind it. And step forward many years later, around the mid-2010s, when Australian government just before they started bringing in, the WCAG as part of, the legal requirements, etc. I was asking accessibility questions about a year before that because I sort of had read about the fact it was coming in, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And being hard of hearing and wearing hearing aids, that sort of resonated a lot with me. So I asked a question online, and a gentleman answered, and the gentleman became my mentor in accessibility for many years, and his name was Brian Garaventa. And he eventually became a very good friend of mine, but he literally, I asked so many questions. I asked the question initially in this online chat, and then ended up, he said, look, here's my email address, just chat. So I spent so many questions. But what if this, especially around ARIA at the time, which was far more essential than it is today, because there were so many gaps in HTML between browsers and the accessibility API. And I'd ask him questions about, okay, but why would you use this? How would you use this? And what would be, but would do this be better because this is what I'm hearing on the screen reader, which sounds better than that. And he would tell me why, as a blind person, it doesn't make more sense because you can see the screen. And it was just went on and on. And I learned so much from that man. It's not funny. At that time, I was a front-end developer working for the Queensland Department of Education in online courses and media, building courses and media for the department. And I introduced accessibility into that section and saying why we need to focus on it. And then, of course, it became a legal requirement, and they were already ahead of the game. In 2020, Telstra reached out to me and asked if I was interested in joining their accessibility team, which at the time was Ben, myself, and Jen Lake, and we had many meetings every day with Adam from Intopia, and he used to join our stand-up every day, and history just goes on. And I started as an accessibility senior specialist, and I still am. They haven't demoted me yet, so that's good news. That's it. That's from me. Back to you, Ricky.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. So what we've got here is a panel representing three very different organisations, three very different environments who approach their work in very different ways. Just to complete the picture, I should have introduced myself. I'm Ricky Onsman. I'm principal technical writer for an organisation called Vispero, which binds together several different companies that focus on digital accessibility consultancy and assistive technology. And I basically write guidance for a large team of engineers around the world, mostly troubleshooting problems. So let's get stuck into this. Accessibility for developers. Maybe I could ask each of you within your environments, what are the tools that you use for development, and how does that connect to accessibility? We'll start with you again, Julie. You're on mute.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm a VS Code girly. I started out back in the day with, what was it called? Like Home Edit. Ricky will know what I mean.
Yeah.
And BB Edit and things like that. But VS Code is where I live now. And I do love a bit of Git action. Git is what got me to venture into the command line and start learning a lot of that. Git's very, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a lot. But I was just saying to someone yesterday how it's worth the steep learning curve. You actually get the payoff is actually quite worth it. But I do love VS Code for its flexibility, and I can always just set it up into different workspaces depending on the type of work that I'm doing that day. So that's where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. And Eric, I guess you're going to say GitHub.
Yeah, yep. +1 to Git and its learning curve, and definitely thinking right now when I first learned about it, being like, oh God, I'll never be able to do this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Ironically, most of my development work these days is done in Markdown, which is either technical documentation or LLM plans or both. I miss VS Code a lot. I miss writing code a lot. So little jealous of you, Julie, to be honest. But yeah, Markdown's a pretty good skill to pick up as well. Do you recommend it?
I was going to say,
Yeah.
you can do Markdown in VS Code.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I write lots of stuff in Markdown within VS Code and then upload it to our various repositories. Yeah.
Yeah. For whatever reason, my brain is like Obsidian is where Markdown lives if you're writing
Okay.
it. So yeah, welcome
Okay.
to my dysfunction. Yeah.
Okay. And Lawrence, what do you use? You're on mute as well. This is dead loud. Everybody's on mute.
From a pure working perspective, in a sort of in Telstra, I don't write any code per se. It's more understanding code of doing testing or providing advice to developers. From a personal perspective, I use VS Code, and I also have been playing with writing some agents for Copilot and GitHub. Sorry, Copilot and Claude, depending on whether I'm doing it in the workspace or something I'm trying to work out at home, how it works. And I also develop alongside with my code partner, Marcus Helvig, the ALMY Quick Check extension, which is basically an extension that assists manual testing. It's not an automation tool or replacement automation tool. It's just provides assistance. When you're manually testing Go, you can use it to get to get feedback on screen for whatever you're manually testing. I use VS Code for that. I've used Xlinter, Storybooks, ALMY, X plugin, and Xcore for CI/CD, pipeline testing, mainly at home, not in the workplace. So that's pretty much from a code perspective, the work I do. So I spend a lot of time coding, but it's more on personal projects and in the workplace.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting. And we've already had a couple of mentions of AI, so that's definitely going to come up in this conversation. There's no question about that. But right now, I'd like to just focus on the accessibility side of things. What type of work do you encounter on your day-to-day basis? How does your work intersect with accessibility? We'll go back to Eric.
Yeah, so I operate a lot like an internal consultant. So there's a lot of variety. I can tell you kind of like the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. Best case being um, something is starting or has like some certainty in direction and like it's coming out of the prototype phase and they're like, yeah, we want to build this. And so there I'm partnering really early and often to like evaluate kind of the design, the code that's being written, looking for like anti-patterns, like to be honest, just gently, repeatedly reminding people to use the design system because we bake a lot of that in. And that does a lot of heavy lifting. Fortunately, the worst outcome, which hasn't happened in a minute, knock on wood, is something's already out the door. Like we have process in place to prevent that. Or there is a deadline crunch for something that needs to be out the door sooner than later. And as with many things, usually a rush job, accessibility is impacted the same way a lot of all the quality metrics are for other concerns. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum.
Okay. And are you talking there about like people who work for GitHub, the products that GitHub produces, that kind of thing, or the people who use GitHub?
The people who build GitHub, yeah. So,
Right.
yeah, like for example, turning the file tree when you're browsing through a repository into something that can be operated with a screen reader, whereas previously it was just a stack of divs with an idea.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Where I work, when I deal with accessibility engineers, quite a few of our engineers have disabilities of various sorts, and quite a few people kind of say, "No, I can't really use GitHub because of I use this particular screen reader and it doesn't work very well." So they're the kind of issues. I mean, you want those people on board, right?
Yes, we do. I will say for people attending and for the recording. We have a formal community report process with escalation. So that's one of the things when the team first formed that we established like a process to collect feedback and actually take action on it. Whereas previously it would sometimes languish, which is not the best thing in the world, but we all know how this works.
Yeah.
So there is infrastructure in place to collect, collate, triage, and assign this kind of work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's quite a large scale. How many users would you say actually use GitHub? It's got to
Millions.
be, yeah, it's got to
Yeah,
be millions, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. I tried to ask
Yeah.
once, and I don't know where that dashboard lives, but everyone was like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Which I guess
yeah,
makes, um, addressing an issue like accessibility quite daunting because it's just so big.
yeah, yeah. I kind of look at the opposite way, where like anytime I get a bug report, I'm really happy because that means somebody tried, and they cared enough to let me know or let our team know, and it feels really good when you're able to close those issues and say like, hey, I'm the guy that helped. Does this work for you? Yes or no? If it's no, we keep hammering on it till it's a yes. So like, I really appreciate those signs of life, and especially that somebody took the time to let us know if something isn't working the way it should be. In
Yeah.
the same breath, I will say, like, I do know a lot of folks who use assistive technology use GitHub in ways that are considered atypical. So, like the command line, email, things that are a lot more compatible with assistive tech, and that's totally 100% valid. I'm glad there's different ways to get what you need.
Right. That's great. That's great. Now, Lawrence, I'll go to you next because you work in a situation, for those who don't know, who are listening from overseas or whatever, Telstra is a telecommunications company, the biggest in Australia, provides phone services, internet services, etc. And obviously, with so much of life online these days, accessibility for an organisation like that is absolutely critical. Um, well, how does your day-to-day work proceed, Lawrence?
Well, my day-to-day work used to be probably 90% accessibility testing websites that have been built across various teams in Telstra. Now, as a senior, I do far less sort of hands-on testing and more sort of more guidance and helping specialists understand how they can become seniors and juniors, how they become specialists, and provide a lot of feedback. A lot of the work I do today is around a particular design library that we have at Telstra. We have a particular design. There's a couple of design libraries in Telstra. I work for one called used to be called TED, but now I actually don't know what it's called because it's all changed. But to me, it's still always going to be TED. And I support that design library from the inception stage of the design all the way through to the final build of a particular component, and then how that component rolls out into particular web pages, and then I will test those. But yeah, there's other projects as well. Like as I say, they're supporting my lead in some of his projects. So the actual hands-on day-to-day testing has probably become more like 15% of my total time rather than 90, which I have to say makes me happy. Although it's fun, accessibility testing and discovering things and learning things and how does this work? Why isn't this working? And screen reader is not giving me what I'm seeing on screen. Why? And the code looks right. What's going on? Being able to dive into that and work out where that little bit is. That's it. It goes. This is why this thing is breaking. That to me is like the part I actually really enjoy in my job, and being able to share that with the others in the team about discovery. And if you ever come across a situation, this would be something that you could look out for. So yeah, look, I have to admit, I love my job. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. Certainly wouldn't want to go back to front-end development. Sorry, all front-end developers. And yes, I use GitHub and have many repositories. Some of them just so old, I don't know why they're still there, but still, it's a great tool. So yeah, that's it. That's who I am, what I do on a daily basis.
Okay, and you mentioned that when you started, there was a team of 3.
Correct.
How big's that team now?
I think it's around 20 or 22, somewhere around that. So over the 6 years, it's just consistently grown. And the more there are, the more you'll be able to help others grow in that accessibility space, like Brian helped me in the beginning, to pass that on, and that learning that people get really enthusiastic about. And the teams I work for at the moment, the Telstra Connect Enterprise team, literally every person in that team is enthusiastic about accessibility because I'm enthusiastic about accessibility, and I pass that on, and just the way I talk about it. And one person in the team says, I'm not a no person. If they say we want to do this, they say quite often somebody will say, oh no, you can't do that. Whereas I'll go, let's look at it. Let's see, okay, it's probably not going to work the way you want it, but how can we make it work? How can we make it accessible? What do we need to do? And just that mindset makes people go, this isn't a blocker. This is something we can work with. And I think that's quite important in my role, to make sure that accessibility is something that people want to do, not have to do. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Julie, let's turn to you and your kind of day-to-day work. Now, we've seen that Lawrence's team has grown in 5 years from 3 people to about 20. Your mob is even greater scale. I think in 10 years, gone from basically 3 people to something like 40. Is that right?
Yes, currently sitting at about 40, and 20 of those are specifically on auditing and assessment. Other people doing training, strategy, and supporting everybody else to get things done. But the auditing assessment team is the biggest team. And so as the head of that, a lot of my day-to-day is less testing than I used to do. Like Lawrence, it's kind of like once you get a team, then it's like, okay, cool. Now the job becomes wrangling the team, keeping everybody coordinated, but not, I don't ever want the team to be too strictly rule-bound, because accessibility is about people. WCAG is just a tool that we use to test and describe accessibility, but it's not the accessibility itself. So some of my team members are supporting in-house teams. So teams like Lawrence's used to have a lot more support from Intopia. Like, as you said, like when it started out and Adam was there in your stand-ups and all of this. But eventually the goal is always to have our consultants help the team get to the point where they don't need us anymore. Where the point is that you should develop that in-house capacity. So now I think at Telstra, we just come in and just say, yep, you're doing good. We verify all of the hard work that the internal team is doing. Other times we get called in it's someone's first time at accessibility, and the only thing they know is that's an audit, right? You get accessibility audited, yeah? Cool, will we pass? And we're like, okay, cool, let's see if we can make this an educational opportunity. So even with an audit, I'm always trying to say, okay, cool, you've asked me to list all the things that are wrong. Here are the ways that you could do them better. But also, one of the questions, it was funny when you said, Eric, like directing people, have you used the design system? We're often asking people, do you have one? Have you considered making it accessible so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time? Like that's helpful. Trying to help people shift left away from that last minute, oh, we've already launched the product, someone should check the accessibility, to earlier in the process. And sometimes too, like there's a lot of people who have legal and financial requirements where they have to have a piece of paper that says, yes, we conform to WCAG or EN 301549 or any other standard. And so it's on us to make sure that legally everything is the way that it ought to be. So a lot of my job, like a day-to-day, I'm often supporting my consultants and auditors. So I tend to get all the hairy questions. I never see anything normal anymore. Like just oh, look, that image needs some alt text. Oh, there's people that handle that. What they bring me is like, okay, this thing has display none, and yet the screen reader can still find it. What's that about? Or like, I don't know, I guess we'll find out. And I think setting standards for us as a team to bring together and sort of say, well, what's our group stance on this? What's our consensus that we believe is the best way to tackle this? What's best practice? So
Okay.
yeah, day to day is a lot of Eric's comment, pining for a tab index too. I do love it. I do say to people, I said, if you find anything weird, stick it in Slack so I can just look at it and go, yeah, the good old days.
Yeah, we have a Teams channel called that basically calls out ridiculous markup that we find, so we can make fun of it.
Yes, yeah, and it's kind of helpful to relieve your feelings. You're like, I would never say that to a client, but I have to say it to someone. Like someone's got to see this and look at it.
Now, Julie, we know that like a large telco like Telstra is one kind of client you have. What are the other types of clients that you work with?
Oh, I don't want to be like name dropping.
What type are they?
But
You work
okay,
with
what type
government?
of yes, government clients are
Right.
some of my favorite to work with, because it feels like, yeah, this, even though the problems they face are often the same problems as every other government client, I'm like, yeah, but your audience is citizens and people living in Australia. They should have all the accessibility that they need.
Right.
I will do a little bit of name dropping. Census is one that we did a lot of work with the first year that they started really thinking about accessibility. And that was wonderful because we got to test with 20 different assistive technologies rather than the more usual handful. Because their attitude was, well, if there is a single person in Australia who needs that technology, we need them to be able to use this and be able to fill in the census using their preferred method. So that was amazing. But yeah, government clients, big software as a service type clients as well. Where often we're just going through and just listing for them, here are all the places that you guys have problems. Good luck. Often they have an in-house accessibility team who don't have the time or capacity to do that kind of hunt for all of the problems. And so we're like, yeah, cool, we'll handle that for you. Then you've got a nice list that you can triage and work out what you're going to do about that. So yeah, it is quite varied. And other times, one of my favorite long-term clients is someone I have a monthly check-in with. And at first, this was them bringing me, oh God, you need to test this. What do we do? How do forms even work? And now they just sort of asking me strategy questions. They've solved all of the small problems. They've got their processes in place over many years of blood, sweat, and tears. And they just ask me, like, almost philosophical level, okay, so how do we create change in a world that has ableism in it? And I'm like, well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer, but let's talk about it. Like, but I love that they're at that level now, that the day-to-day is cleared out, and now they can actually have the space and time, because that's a luxury. When you've got bosses breathing down your neck and deadlines and tight budgets, to have the ability to do that is truly wonderful, and it's where I hope to get all my clients to eventually.
Right. There's another aspect that I'm curious about. In my work, we deal with a lot of clients who are basically, the reason they're even considering accessibility is because they're scared of getting sued.
Yes.
A lot of the US-based clients are like that. A lot of the European clients are going, oh my God, we've got this new piece of legislation in, we have to comply. Mm-hmm. What motivates clients to come to Intopia?
I think sometimes it is that you're going to get sued, but often, and I think in the Australian context, we're not a litigious kind of society. I think in Australia, there's much more of a, if you call customer service and they have good customer service, the person on the other end of the phone or the email will say, oh, that sucks. Can I fix that for you? Like, they might not know how to fix it, but they are there to help. And I think that goes a long way. So often we get people who are new to accessibility and don't know where to start. And if you Google for it, someone will say audit, and they're like, cool, we'll get one of those in. And so it's really just the first step in their journey. And we're like, okay, cool, let's not worry so much about conformance, and let's talk about what kinds of problems are there. Other people, though, come to us because they understand accessibility as a quality measure. And so they come to us and they're like, what can we do that's not to do with conformance and compliance and minimum requirements? What can we do that's actually helping our users have the best possible experience? What would that look like for our customers with a disability? And that's always a joy, because you can absolutely prioritize stuff that users care about over stuff that lawyers care about.
Yeah.
But a much less litigious. I hope that doesn't come to Australia. I hope that attitude doesn't. But I think our legal system and my understanding of various legal cases that we have supported people through is that generally, as soon as you get a lawyer involved in Australia, they will say it would be much cheaper for you to just solve this problem and fix it than it would be to go to court and lose, because you will lose in Australia. The law is, it doesn't seem very crunchy on the surface of it, but you'd have to make a pretty extraordinary case to win. And the lawyers are like, be a lot cheaper if you just talk to this person with a disability and fix the problem, wouldn't it? And we thoroughly support that approach. Don't pay lawyers if you don't have to. So
that's good. Now we all mentioned WCAG a few times, and we should probably explain that we're talking about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is an international set of standard. It's a standard, and it's important to realize it's not a law as such. It's not a law you comply with. It's a set of guidelines that you try to conform to. Lawrence, how much does WCAG drive the work that you do? Do you feel restricted by it, or do you step beyond WCAG?
Okay, so in the work we do, we have a system where if a website's developed and it's in pre-prod and we do the testing on that website, if there's any non-conformance of level A or AA, they're not allowed to go live with it. They can't be pushed through. We also have something called expert observations. Okay, so expert observations are something that fall basically between the gaps of WCAG, or with Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, whichever way you want to pronounce it. And so we'll put those up as expert observations, and they must be fixed within a certain time period after the product can be released. So there are strict guidelines in how in the fact that we do conform to the level A and AA, that's it. Really makes people want to fix those issues, because they have to make sure they have enough story points, if we were talking agile, in order to fix those as part of their build process. They know at the end of a build there's probably going to be a certain amount of accessibility issues that are identified, and they need to build in the story point to fix those. So it's all built into the development process. Having an accessible design library, of course, reduces that overload of accessibility issues, and usually issues are either they're not using components, or they're not componentizing their builds, or it's just something we didn't sort of think of during the component build, that once it's put into a certain page, and suddenly there's a situation where you go, oh, that didn't come up, and then we'll go back and we'll let them know and say, look, once it's in the page, we need to fix this. Component team needs to fix it. And again, it's at level A and AA. It still holds it back before they can go live, even if it's not the responsibility of the specific team that has built that specific page and they're relying on that component. So that's right. Pretty much. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that was.
Yeah, you have. And in that process, do you encounter pushback, particularly from devs, as this is what we're focusing on, either because that's not what WCAG says, you got it wrong, or that's not my job?
Occasionally, not very often. Most of the devs, as I said earlier, become enthusiastic about it, and quite often you find when new developers come in, somebody asked a question in the chat about about developers who basically build dev soup, which is what I like to call it. And how do they learn about HTML, and how do they learn about CSS? And one of the ways we do is when new developers come in, the existing developers will have a way of showing them the type of builds that we do. But also, if we do find something then we can sit with them and go, okay, these are this is why a div doesn't actually provide any semantic information. And if you can see this heading visually on the screen, what happens if I make this all just text? How easy does this website come to for you to sort of read it and understand it and section it and move to a part of the web page you want to move to? And they suddenly click and go, oh, okay, that's what it does. That's what semantics are. This is why we need to use HTML or whatever equivalent there is in order to make it accessible. Now I understand what accessibility is. But as far as pushback's concerned, look, in the 6 years at Telstra, I think it's probably been 2 or 3 times. You can count on one hand the amount of times we've had pushback. And that's usually not from developers. That's usually from the people responsible for delivery.
Right.
Rather than, we've got to go live this time. We can't stop. We can't not go live on this. It's crucial. It's critical. This is whatever it may be. Sorry to all the people who are not developers and in that band of, but very, very, very few times, I have to admit.
I'm going to say I probably get that more often than Lawrence does. Telstra has a relatively mature, and I think to any person coming into Telstra is surrounded by other people who have that mature thing, so it's easier for them to get up to speed. Whereas a lot of the time our clients, if they're on the first time accessibility, somebody has championed it and found budget to get us to look at it, and it may not be the developer. And they are like, they've been given this long list. Somebody dumps this long list of problems on their desk and says, deal with that. And I'm like, I wish you hadn't presented it to them that way. It could have been done more smoothly. We do try to have like Q&A sessions, and we invite the people who need to make the fixes along to sort of say, do you have questions? Do you need support? What are the boundaries here? But often, similar to Lawrence, I find if people are resistant, often showing, particularly developers, showing them the tech is often a good way in, because if you're a developer, there is a good chance that you enjoy a good bit of gear and techie stuff. So sort of saying, hey, here's the accessibility API. You can look at it in your browser. Here is what assistive technology is picking up and transforming for another audience. And that's usually something enough to get people to go, oh, no, that's quite interesting, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it is. You could have a go. You could get good at this. I often find that approach quite helpful. But also sometimes you're just like, all you can do is just show up and be helpful and positive and hope that next time someone mentions accessibility, they think, oh, those accessibility people were kind of all right to talk to. Maybe we'll call them up sooner this time instead of waiting until after launch.
I think in those situations, it certainly does help having a developer background.
Yeah, being able to talk the
way
language.
you impart knowledge and the way you talk, that sort of gets that engagement.
100%.
Yeah. Eric, I'd like to bring you into that as well, because I mean, you have an even more honed perspective there. You're working on a tool that's for developers, being built by developers. How do you handle that? Do you get pushback from people saying that's just not a priority for us?
Yes, unfortunately. It depends on who you're working with and what their motivations are. And so like can be really effective to figure out what's driving them. Are they seeking glory? Are they looking for a promotion? Are they trying to do the right thing? And then adapting how you approach that to, kind of what they're looking to do. And so kind of like echoing what Lawrence said earlier, like I usually like to lead with like it's my job to figure out how to say yes, which is like given that we have these mandates or these like standards of quality that we all kind of collectively agree on, like how do we get from there to here? And like sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's it's tricky, I guess is what I mean to say. Yeah. Appeals to quality usually help, I think. And like I threw in the chat, that Vimium extension is usually that aha moment. The other thing that I think has been really successful is putting the human face on it. So like showing how somebody, and this is actually true and led to the redesign of our sign up form, which is like showing how somebody with a screen reader can't create an account. It just subtracts so much of this like abstract like business concern out of it and just grounds it in like here's somebody that just wants to create an account so your sign up numbers go up, so you're happy, and they can't because they hit a hard barrier and they bounce. And that just cuts through so much bureaucracy and agenda setting. So I think it's a really powerful tool if wielded properly and with respect.
Right. Yeah. I'll stay with you, but I'll put this question to each of you. What are the most common or the most impactful accessibility issues that you come across, particularly that are dev focused?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Lawrence.
Right, yes, you go ahead, please.
Okay. So a lot of accessibility problems, I'd say the majority, start in the design layer. So um, I'm resisting the urge to jump straight to WCAG success criterion for issues, but let's see if I can reverse engineer it. Like how it will look on a small screen, how it, because that's the same as how it will look when somebody bumps up the type size. How like also responsive design exists. Sweet, it's been around for a little bit. We should probably do it. Um, what things are called if they make sense when you click on them, like what they're going to do. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Like that maps back to like name role value, which is like, do you even understand what this thing will do or why it exists? Not at GitHub because we have a really mature color design token system, but like color contrast is another one of those where, there's some pretty hard and fast rules about what you can and can't do, and that smacks right up against people's idea of what looks aesthetically pleasing. Um, that's not a fun one, but here we are. Um, and then I'd say also just keyboard operation,
Yeah.
not by malice, but sometimes there's just something funky and you got to like really unpick how it should actually work with a keyboard past like I think a lot of people think it's just like, well, just mash tab a lot and it'll work. And like, yes, but also there's other things you need to think through too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of interaction kind of stuff. Um, what's your view on using ARIA?
ARIA is a sometimes treat.
Yeah.
um, yeah, there's the docs have like the first rule of ARIA is don't use it if you can. That said, like the map is not the territory, by which I mean like one of the weird things you learn in your accessibility journey is ARIA has different shades of support in the actual, and then also HTML has different shades of support with screen readers and assistive technology in the actual. And so there's places where I will have to use ARIA to reinforce what should be working. Makes me feel gross, but like, that's an abstract, icky feeling versus like, well, this is the difference between it working and not working. And
Yeah.
like the interesting kind of tidbit within that is oftentimes that like dogmatic don't use ARIA if you don't need to will show up in our linting, which is like a way to check if code is observing standards of quality. And I actually have to override that to be like, no, like your heart's in the right place here, robot, but we actually need to switch you off for now so this can actually work for the people that need it. And
Right.
that's a weirdly weird place to be because you want to document the hell out of it because like not a lot of people unfortunately have pretty good familiarity with ARIA, and so they might see it and they might be like, "Oh, why do you do that? We shouldn't be doing this." And you have to be like, "No, this is for a reason. I trust me here."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, that's a good answer. And I know exactly what you mean. Just this morning, I was dealing with a situation with a client who had on their website a widget to allow users to change the language of the page. And they had, to their credit, tried to use a native HTML select option. Um, the trouble was that when you apply the language attribute to the option items, screen readers ignore them. And I couldn't believe it. And I went through and I tested with every screen reader combination I could. None of them read out or changed the language. So they continued to read, even though you changed the language to Dutch, they continued to read it out as if it was English. And it took me a while to come up with an answer. And there is one, a multi-select combo box will actually support the language attribute and screen readers respective. But it took me ages to find out. And I had to tell them, no, you don't use native HTML here. You're better off using an ARIA combination, which is really disappointing. Lawrence, you were going to say something there about the what we've just been talking about, the accessibilities that you encounter, particularly with regard to developers.
It's just one word: focus management. That's probably the biggest issue.
Right.
Understanding focus management. Where focus should go when I click this element, and particularly in forms when there's errors, focus is just left on the button because the errors there. They're not understanding how people who are blind or have low vision interact with the screen. It's just not part of the thinking makeup in the beginning of. We need to sort of actually move this focus here for that person to be able to perceive that piece of information. So focus management is probably the biggest thing that comes into what developers just constantly miss.
Right.
I have to say with the ARIA thing, I'm not it doesn't gross me out like Eric. It has its purpose, and as long as that purpose is you know, as long as it's like HTML. I mean, if you don't write the code properly, it's not going to work. The same with ARIA, and to me, it is still always going to be that stopgap until support is sufficient in a native component that we can use it and say safely and say across all of the browsers and as many screen readers as possible, because quite often it's not going to be all, because screen readers themselves have bugs, and then you've got to work out, is it a screen reader bug? Is it a browser bug? Is it a bug in the code? Especially when something's really hairy and you go, this looks right. Why? So I'm a frequent, in GitHub again, I'm a frequent contributor to asking questions of the particular, you know, WCAG, ARIA, etc. working groups in their GitHub issues repositories of why doesn't this work, or how, or whatever it is. And I think it's a fantastic online resource through GitHub to ask those questions and get those responses and get a cross section of what people think. Why? I know I deviated there a bit, but I just wanted to add that little bit in of ask questions. That's the main thing. If you're not sure, go online. It's a free resource. You can go there and you can ask a question. And I think if you want to learn, ask.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And really, we're dealing here with kind of a historical quirk in that ARIA was created in the first place to address the fact that native elements didn't do everything we wanted them to do.
Right.
But by the time HTML5 has come along, native HTML does an awful lot more. So we're in this weird situation where on the one hand, we've got all these websites that are like legacy websites that are riddled with ARIA because they were put together before HTML5 existed. And then on the other hand, we've got these young developers using frameworks that are basically div soup, that they slap ARIA onto every possible way because, well, that's what makes things accessible.
We have to talk about web components if that comes down to that, because web components is something that is taking over a lot of frameworks in the sense of, you know, React or Angular or Vue or whatever people building. You know, and when you start using web components and those web components get pulled into different frameworks like React, then you have this sort of compounding problem of how things work. And that's one of the more recent learning things that I've made myself go through and understand is how the Shadow DOM works, you know, and how the Shadow DOM communicates with, I'll use the term light DOM for the sake of a better term, and how they communicate with each other. And these are things that, you know, as accessibility senior specialist, I need to understand that, so I know when I'm testing that or a developer's asking me, I can provide that feedback and say, well, this is what you need to consider, and this is and I built a web component site built on Lit purely so I could learn, and I built in deliberate props to break it.
Yeah.
So I could see, how does it break? What happens with the screen reader when it's broken? And that taught me how to actually talk to developers again and how to commit that accessibility requirement or conformance. And how do we conform in the web components world as opposed to pure HTML world, with or without ARIA support? So yeah, it's an industry that's got so many parts. It's not just accessibility. It's not just the web content accessibility guidelines. There are so many moving parts happening, and there's technology, and we've spoken AI. As AI comes in, how does AI fit in that? And so I built an agent that I got up on GitHub again, that basically tries to, or as best as possible, forces any question that comes in when you use that agent. It will resource the documentation, like the HTML standard, the WCAG guidelines, CSS standards, SVG standards, etc., etc., all the standards or guidelines or specifications to provide an answer, and it must provide a what's the word? It must basically say where that information came from,
Right.
and give a link to that information. And also, if it's taken from a blog, which are there many great blogs out there, it specifies that it's his opinion based on this blog. So it just breaks it down further than just plugging it in and asking the question, because I've done that myself, and every time you ask it, it gets a different answer, pretty much. And probably, 80% of the time, it's still partially or fully incorrect. You always have to go back and go, but. And thankfully, it no longer goes, "Oh, you're absolutely correct. Well, wonderful person you are for pointing that out to me."
You're so wonderful with your
disappeared
questions.
a little bit.
Well, look, before we dive further into AI, which is going to probably take the rest of the session, Julie, I just want to see if there's anything you want to add to that notion of what are the most common things that occur and the most impactful from a developer's point of view.
I think from a dev point of view, it is to sort of echo what Eric and Lawrence have said, it is the interactions. It's how different parts of the page interact with each other or within a browser environment is the tricky part. The automated tests will take care of a lot of your basic structure. And I do sometimes see, like, again, we get audits and I'm like, oh, someone's run an automated test over this and it's giving them errors that they don't know how to solve. And so they're just kind of throwing ARIA at it with a kind of spray and pray approach. And I am like, okay, that's not the way I'd handle it, but okay, you got there in the end and the screen reader user won't know how horrible that code looks. All right, fine. There's definitely some, like Eric, ARIA is the bridge between the HTML we've got and the HTML we wish we've got. And so it's like, yeah, sometimes there's things that need to happen that HTML just can't do. And sometimes HTML elements get introduced without sufficient accessibility consideration. So input type date, I really wish that was better, but it's not. And so you're going to have to custom build that one. Field set also is one where I'm like, oh, if you're not good at CSS, if you're good at CSS, you can make field set work nicely with a legend and everything. If you are not strong with CSS, I'm like, oh, just put an ARIA role equals group on it and like an ARIA labeled by, and we'll get there, right? Like it'll be nicer and easier because the underlying HTML doesn't quite do the job. But I do generally feel like my take on it is I am with I've forgotten what they're called, but it's part of the W3C like principles of how things should work. And it's like you should prefer the lowest solution in the stack. Right. So HTML preferred to CSS, preferred to JavaScript, preferred to ARIA, because it's the most robust and the most easily transformed into other formats. As a general rule, with plenty of caveats and exceptions, and okay, yes, that except when it's input type date, and field set, and all these other things. But generally, yeah, I do think it is that interaction layer. I think these days there's a lot of good tools for getting your good semantic HTML, and as soon as people understand why you need it and what it does for you, people get on board. But the interaction part is harder because it depends so much on context.
Right. Right.
And there I fulfilled my quota of saying, oh, it depends on the context in literally every conversation about accessibility I have ever. Like, tick, done.
Yeah. Yeah. That does make me wonder, do you run into situations where it's a matter of whose job is it to do this? You've got a single page application and it scrolls forward The screen reader doesn't
One
move
person made
focus
this
to the-
component, someone else made that component, and now they have to play nicely together.
So
Yeah,
whose job is it
100%.
to make sure the focus goes to the right place then? Is it the
Yeah.
designer because they've got to give it, like the H1 a particular piece of markup, or
And it depends on what their workplace structure is like, who's responsible for what. So often I end up, sometimes when it's that kind of problem in an audit where I'm like, I'm not even going to get to speak to the person who is going to be receiving this from me, which is the biggest limitation, is I'm put there, discuss with your colleagues what the options are for, because conversation is often the actual solution.
Right.
Like Lawrence and Eric saying, it's my job to get us to yes. It's like, yeah, go talk to someone. There will be a way to make this work, but you will have to actually do the awkward part of talking to another human being. And some days that's harder than others. So,
Of course.
but
Now,
it's
I
the
feel
heart of it.
we should have a look at some of the questions that have been put in the
Yes,
chat here. There've been quite a few. So
there's some good
I'll
ones
scroll
going
back a
by.
bit. Question for the panel around mixed methods. How do you strike the right balance between automated and manual testing, both for day-to-day dev team and at an organizational compliance level? Julie, you've got the microphone.
I'm mic'd up. I am a big proponent of getting everybody to run as many automated tests as work in their environment. They're not perfect. They're not going to pick everything up. But great, that's a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't have to do manually. Brilliant. Love it. Take that and use it. And then my next thing is, okay, cool. Not everybody is going to learn to be good at manual testing. Not everybody, you can't replicate the experience of someone whose screen reader is their daily driver. You can't get that level of expertise, and it's not fair to expect people to try. On the other hand, a 5-minute keyboard test will pick up a lot of stuff. It will pick up focus issues. It will pick up like, oh, hang on, I can actually reach this control that I thought I'd hidden. Will it work perfectly with a screen reader? Probably not. But if you can do it with a keyboard, then it will be manageable with a screen reader, probably most of the time. It gets you a long chunk of the way, even when it's not perfect. And even, I think, gets things to the point where someone can actually, say a screen reader user might be able to make a meaningful complaint rather than just being locked out at step one and just, as Eric says, bouncing, like we're gone. If you can kind of muddle your way through it, someone says, okay, well, someone cared enough to let me get this far. Maybe it's worth my while to go to the extra additional effort of making a complaint. But yeah, 5-minute keyboard test is my starting point for that kind of mixed method thing. It's like, please just try it with a keyboard. Please just try it with a keyboard.
Yeah. Eric, what about you? Where do you sit on the balance between automated and manual testing?
Yeah, so I am also like, I don't want to, and forgive me if this sounds harsh, but like I don't want to waste my time with things that a robot can detect. It's not productive, and it takes my time and attention away from the stuff that a robot can't detect, which is usually a lot more complicated and requires that manual testing. Um, Two other things kind of about automated testing that I think are worth noting is like also the optics of being an accessibility practitioner in an organization where engineers are very used to linting and automated tests to say like the code quality is not up to par when they go to like submit it. Um, and that's a lot less of an emotional exercise than somebody that you've never interacted with before telling you you're doing it wrong, and then citing some rules that you've never heard of and making you use code you didn't even know existed. So, the automated testing solutions of the world that like identify the problem, explain the problem, and like show up in places where they're used to as a matter of course, does a lot of heavy lifting, reputationally as well. And the other thing I kind of wanted to cover is with manual testing is there's another kind of flip, and Julie touched on it with like daily users who require this technology. You want to be careful around manual evaluation as well, where you don't want somebody with great confidence proposing a solution from assistive technology they've only picked up like 5 minutes ago and thinking it's how it works. And that's a little bit more of a tricky situation because we want to encourage people to explore these tools, but we also don't want to make bad calls in good confidence if misplaced. So it's a tricky dance.
Yeah, no, that's great points. Lawrence, what about you? Where do you sit on the balance between manual and automated testing?
Well, firstly, I think they all have their place. From an automated testing perspective, it has to be implemented properly. It can't be ad hoc. I think I'll use this, or maybe use this tool, or they're giving me conflicting information. So there has to be some sort of consistency. But things like from a design side of it, the software that is like Figma that around today, they have reasonably good plugins, etc., to sort of try and identify accessibility issues within the design phase, which is something that wasn't there a few years ago. So you're already identifying some things. Even again, it has to be something that is broken for it to be identified as an issue. If something's not actually broken, it doesn't mean to say it's going to be accessible. It's just not going to be identified by automation testing. So it's using your linter in VS Code or Xcore or equivalent during your build phase, using your plugins in Figma or whatever particular software you're using. They identify, as the word has been mentioned already, the low-hanging fruit. As Eric says, if I'm testing a website, I really don't need to see a visual heading that is marked up as a div or a P tag, paragraph tag. It should not get to that point. Automating testing is perfectly brilliant for identifying those specific issues. But as I say, if you take something like on a web page and you have a visual heading and there's a div around it, automation tool won't necessarily identify that as a heading. So that's where the manual testing side of it would come into it. As a sighted person, I can see that is visually styled, independent, introduces or signposts a part of a section of information. This should be a heading, But when I check the code, it's a div. Okay, so that's where the manual testing comes in. That in most cases or existing automation tools don't identify. Again, with the AI thing, that may be something that is going to improve because AI can identify something through its styling, its size, and go, okay, perhaps there should be a heading. You need to see if this is a heading. It's not marked up properly. Actually, ALMY Quick Check does that. You can actually go identify potential headings, and it'll give you a little message to say, just make sure this is verified. This isn't whether this is a heading or not. So it's again a learning part of the tool. But that's to me the difference in a nutshell between automation and in fact, the other thing about automation is there's some real hyped up figures about how much automation will identify. Even the 30 to 40% is, to me, still pretty way too high. I'm one of those who goes, look, from experience, you're possibly identifying, depending on the web page, of course, you might pick up 100% on a particular web page because they're all issues that can be identified through automation. But in average, you're probably looking at 10 to 15% of issues identified. But that's 10 to 15% of issues that don't have to be identified and fixed later, that can be fixed during build. So when you're talking about an ROI on accessibility and automation tools, that's where the monetary part comes in. I'm not spending money afterwards holding back, a build because automation testing wasn't run and those things weren't identified in the start.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Great points all. Now we have a question for Julie, so you guys can relax. Julie, how do you handle clients who just want the stamp of approval? Yes, this product is accessible, but then the dev team keeps breaking accessibility down the line. As an accessibility company, how do you protect yourselves in that situation?
So in multiple ways, and it is absolutely 100% a problem that we face regularly. There are people who just, as far as they're concerned, someone told them they had to get a tick off of a checklist, and that's all they want from us. And when that happens, we try to give them the best, most accurate tick we can. But also that sometimes means they come in thinking that they're actually doing a great job, and you're like, I am afraid to tell you that that is not the case. Let's not. When we issue any kind of bit of paper to certify anybody's conformance or otherwise, it always has a caveat saying, as of this date, this is the scope that we checked. Things outside of this scope may not be compliant, but they also might be compliant. We didn't look. It is according to our interpretation of WCAG, but it's that as of this date is the really important part. It's like, yeah, the beautiful part of the web is that you can just update it easily. It's not carved in stone. It's not print or video once filmed. That's that. And so it will be changing. Ideally, it should be changing. So we do always say, as of this date. The other thing that we do is with clients, we try to, if they come back and they're like, oh, but you said we were clear last time. Can't you just reissue the same conformance thing? And we're like, well, no, we have to look again. And they're like, oh, but we didn't change much. And I'm like, cool, do you know exactly what you changed in the last 12 months? And they're like, probably. And I'm like, yeah, go looking. We have to look again. But also if they're saying, usually at that point, they will notice and say, hey, this is the same problem we had last time. And I'm like, yeah, you fixed it. And then someone unfixed it. This is shift left. In accessibility is you have to start talking to your devs and saying, okay, why does this mistake keep happening? Could you make a component that everybody uses so that people don't edit it? If you already have a component, is it possible can you like put some guardrails on it so that people don't accidentally create problems? If that's not possible, and it isn't always, can you tell people why it is the way that it is? And sort of say, if you change this, you might have a good reason, but also be aware that you are now responsible for the accessibility of it. And so if you deviate from the design system, now that's your responsibility. We also have done assessments of design systems and said, but we put a different caveat on that. And we say, yes, the design system team has put their heart and soul. We don't put that on a bit of paper, but we make it clear that they've made a very real effort to make this the best and most accessible it can be. You are now accessibility ready. And we borrowed that term a bit from WordPress. In their theme system, you are accessibility ready. You can make accessible things using this design system. Whether or not they end up being accessible is on you, and you have that responsibility. And if something goes wrong, don't blame the design system team. But if you're not sure, the design system team would probably love to hear from you. Like before you make any mistakes, if you have to modify it, go talk to them. Oh, as always, it comes back to these conversations. But it is often a very gradual process. If people are in a compliance only mindset and all they want to do is the bare minimum, often you have to actually just support that way of thinking for a little while and gradually plant the seeds for future growth.
Right. Yeah.
And you kind of just got to say, okay, well, here's your compliance thing. It's not very compliant, but we did do it as of this date. Call us next year and we'll see how you go. How's that been? And when they come back, you sort of say, how is it? and they say, oh, actually, it's terrible. We think we've made a lot of mistakes. You say, that sucks. But that happens, right? That's normal. That's a normal problem to have. You're not a bad person for having that problem, but let's try and maybe do something other than minimum compliance this time, and get you a better result for the next one. So there's definitely days where we have to remind ourselves that we are in it for the long game. So some days we're like, today was not good, but next year will be better.
And that also cuts to the truth that, you know, shifting left is one thing, but at the other end, you've got to recognize that it's not a single event, that it's a constant process of reviewing your accessibility. And to some extent, that is a driver for people bringing accessibility in-house, so they don't have to keep paying Intopia every year.
Exactly. And that's the goal, really, is to get to the point where they'll always, people are like, how will you work if you graduate all of your clients to not needing you? And I'm like, there'll always be more people making new stuff who don't know anything about accessibility. But like, that's a problem for another decade from now. But I deep sympathy for anyone who is dealing with this. I'll buy you a drink sometime if we're in the same town, because I know how it feels.
I identify with it very much myself. Devs working in inaccessible frameworks and not understanding the basics of HTML and CSS. How could this be improved? Lawrence, let's start with you on that.
Well, it's always a tricky question how something can be improved. It really does depend on the developer and their mindset to start with. So many developers I work with, you know, once you explain the benefits of it, they're interested in learning it. And if you can point them into the right information, the right way of finding that information, pointing out examples of good examples of how something could be done. Majority of developers are very sort of, yep, this makes sense. I understand it. Sorry, can you repeat the question again? Because
basically, how could we improve the situation where developers are relying on inaccessible frameworks and they don't really understand?
I was on the right track, yes. Basically say, don't you? I suppose it would be the easiest way to say, look, that framework is not accessible. Look, we recommend probably not using it. But if we know it's inaccessible, and it is in somewhere that you can provide feedback to that developer, or you can contribute to that framework, then, you know, contribute and provide feedback to them so they can improve it. I mean, some frameworks, or people who have built frameworks, like everyone else, unless you know something, unless you learn something, you're not aware of it. And by teaching or by providing feedback, and providing feedback is critical in a lot of things like this, you know, not only accessibility, but, you know, providing feedbacks helps improve tools,
right?
Regardless, but from accessibility lens, and it's providing that feedback and guidance. And where do you find this information? I can't sit here and dump everything in my head out, and there's already too much in there, but I can't dump it all out and go, here you go, just dig through here and you'll find it. But we do have the internet, and if you steer them to the right points and the right places and the right phraseologies, then I think that's just one way of improving that, that situation.
That makes sense. Eric, is this something you run into in your day-to-day work?
Not so much. We have a pretty mature design system. I guess one area where that's like kind of trickling in is as we're adopting certain frameworks that are very LLM compatible. They are horror shows in terms of accessibility support. And so like that bias and those issues definitely creep into the system. And so you got to be very on top of swatting it down.
Right.
That said, like usually for these frameworks, it's not malice, it's more just ignorance. Like you don't know what you don't know. And so approaching fixes upstream in the library itself are usually met positively as long as you don't kick the door in and be like, this is bad and you should feel bad. Treat it like a regular bug report. Like I noticed XYZ, I can reproduce it. Here's, my suggestion for how to fix it. And like 9 times out of 10, people will be very receptive to that. And I say with the library itself because we want that network effect of like you can fix it in your own thing for your own code for your own website, but think of everybody else out there who's using that framework and like you want
Right.
them to also appreciate those benefits. And then I forget who said it, but it's like it's software. You can update it. It's not that hard. So like that's another benefit where it's like, yeah, right now the accessibility support is kind of crap, but a week from now it could be better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Julie, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, as far as improving over time, I do think again it's that shift left, but in another, not internally but externally, the tools we use to create software and websites should be better at supporting good creation. I'm a big fan of ye olde ATAG standard, which I really hope will get folded into WCAG 3 or otherwise updated. But the browsers should be able to supply some of this stuff. Hidde de Vries has done a lot of work in that area. Content management systems should be supplying a lot of this. Frameworks and libraries should be supplying a lot of this. Anything that's reusable, it should be in the source and not on the developer as author to catch every single thing. That's an ideal scenario. In the real world, devs are kind of the final safety net for accessibility. They're the ones with the power to edit something after it's launched. So it often does fall on them. But I do think that education and outreach to the kinds of places that are training up developers is something that never seems to quite get off the ground. And I assume that's because it's a difficult problem. But it's probably one that needs to get tackled at some point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We do have quite a lot more questions in the chat, but we're running out of time, and I do want to have at least a little bit of touch on AI. It is, kind of the elephant in the room at the moment. So maybe we'll stay with you, Julie, and tell us, how do you use AI at the moment? What forms does it take, and what are the pros and cons?
I'm a minimalist for AI. I like the idea of it more than I like the actuality of it. I was raised on Star Trek. And so for me, the idea of an actually capable, independent thing is delightful. And then I look at LLMs and I'm like, oh, it's not really it, is it? That said, I think it's one of these things that it flattens out a lot of accessibility, it's where it intersects with accessibility is where a lot of my disappointment comes from. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it outside of accessibility. So I don't want to cast shade on anybody else's joy. But I find with accessibility, so much of the work that we do is about finding exceptions and edge cases and surfacing those and making them visible to more people. And LLMs tend to go for average, plausible, the 80% correct answer. And so I find LLMs are often better than not. Like if someone is a lone developer who cares about accessibility in their organization and all you've got for support is an LLM, go for it. Please use it. Enjoy. But I would like to see more effort from the people who make them to get these more factual things in, to be more aware of the biases. my usual test for any LLM that I have played with, and I've played with as many as I can, is label and name in WCAG. That's often quite telling, because if you ask it, say, oh, what is the requirements? What does label and name mean that I have to do? And it goes, you should put labels on things. You're like, and then it's like, yeah, and names. You should name things. I'm like, yeah, cool. What about how they match? It's because the vast majority of material about accessibility to do with labels is to do with how to label things. And the vast majority of name stuff is to do with accessible names. And label and name is actually really kind of simple and basic. It's like your visible label should match your accessible name. But that little it should match part is too small within the overwhelming data bank. I forget what the actual technical term is for the data that it's all trained on. It's just such a tiny fraction. It gets outweighed by all of the other mentions. So that's where I'm at. On the other hand, as a developer, I find it way more interesting. I'm using Claude Code in VS Code, and I really enjoy the planning mode. I find that really helpful for figuring out the gotchas that I would have discovered and resolved by myself. But gee, it's nice to have them all listed out before I start. That's really convenient, and I do like it. I'll take that any day over sweating through Atlassian documentation, looking for their REST API data. That's this week's chore. But yeah, I think some of our clients are doing really interesting things with AI and accessibility, and I'm sure Lawrence will be able to speak to some of that. A lot of them are training their LLM on, like, doing post-training with their own previous issues and their own guidance and their own design system, so that it's custom to them. And that seems to be working very well. Rather than, oh, look at the entire internet worth of inaccessible or incorrect information about accessibility. What about us with our code base, our design system, our log of previous issues and how they were resolved? That's interesting and worth training up on. So if people have that opportunity, I give it a whirl, see if it helps you.
Right. Well, let's follow that thread to Lawrence. And Lawrence, give us how do you use AI at the moment, and what do you think of it?
I have mentioned AI a couple of times in this. I think it's an exciting technology. I'm definitely not anti-AI. I think it's something that's here to stay, and we need to make it work as best as we possibly can. From the first time I used an LLM a few years ago to now, there has been some great leaps and bounds and improvements. And being able to actually write sort of agents within, or sort of guides within the various LLMs now improves the feedback we're going to get, or the information that it spits out at us. It's to Julie's point, you know, if you train it right, then you're going to get a better answer. And I just thought I'd do a little test there. As I said, I've got an agent called Spec First ALM My Research, and I've wrote into it, what is labeling name and why does it matter for accessibility? And it says this involves WCAG 2.2 success criterion 2.5.3 labeling name, and the accessible name and description computation 1.2 how accessible technology to determine the controls accessible name, and gives you references to where all that stuff. But the basic answer to this, and this is way improved for what it used to be, is labeling name means that the accessible name announced by a screen reader should include the same words that are visible on screen. That's pretty accurate. Then it gives you good and bad examples, and goes into how it affects screen reader users, how it affects speech to text users, and that's just because of this agent saying, look here for this information. So we do have, you know, those of us who can code to a degree, we can improve these things, and we can share these. Like I've shared that on GitHub as a resource. If anybody wants to just add it into their, you know, their LLM, go for it, try it out. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's a slight improvement. But if we keep slightly improving, then we're going to get better and better information out of it. But overall, I think it's still got a long way to go. And when I say a long way in the modern world, we're probably talking a couple of years before you'll start seeing it identify more accessibility issues than it is now. I mean, companies like the Cure are diving, quite strongly into AI within their tools. I'm not sure about Vespro. That's something obviously you could answer.
A lot.
So companies are investing, and when companies invest, they're going to want to have a reasonable outcome within a reasonable time frame, and I think that's what we want to look out for.
Okay. Last words to you, Eric. What's your take on AI?
Yeah, I'll keep it hopefully relatively quick. So I am compelled to use AI at work. I've built a general purpose accessibility agent that has remediated 10,000 plus pull requests across the GitHub surface area. Also, I was in Europe and it was an average temperature of 98 degrees and the sky is on fire right now. So I have complicated feelings about this technology. It can be very good when programmed with intent and knowledge. The thing that I worry about the most that I'm seeing play out here is it moves the overton window away from, is this actually usable for people with disabilities, to can we create a solution that solves accessibility? So, it's taking that concern around automated testing and kind of giving it the spicy twist of like, why are we ultimately doing all this? Is it to check a box? Is it to like make yourself feel good, or is it to actually enable people to use stuff? And in my accessibility agent, there are certain things I know it can't do and will probably never be able to do. And it is very aggressively coded to say, I can't help you with this. Go talk to the accessibility team. We need more of that because right now people are treating it like a magic bullet. And it is not that. That's a very interesting technology with some pretty interesting use cases, but it is not a perfect answer to accessibility. You can't solve accessibility. What was the other
We've
thought?
had, oh, sorry. While you think of your thought, I'll say, yeah, we have had clients who are, like, as I've said, they're trying to train it up on their specific stuff. We've also had clients who treat it like an overlay, like a one-click. I asked AI to make this accessible and it said it had. We're done here. And you're like, okay, did you check? Like, did you check if it told you the truth or not? But I think that's an underlying problem of ableism rather than, it's not the technology's fault. People will always try and answer a human problem with a technological solution. It's not the fault of the LLM, it's the fault of the human who doesn't want to think about it. But I interrupted you, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm glad you did. Like the flip of that is also like, and again, very complicated feelings. There are a lot of folks I know who are, blind or otherwise disabled who don't use those support channels that I was talking about in the chat because they know they're not going to get an answer. But using an LLM, they're able to create a solution that works for them that bypasses the barriers that they're experiencing. And so, like, a thing I grapple with, which is like my personal values and beliefs versus that autonomy that this technology grants. So, like, it be complicated.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you very much. As usual, we've gone slightly over time, and as usual, I could have spent another hour and a half chatting with you people easily about all this. But for now,
We should
thank you
do a
all
part
three,
two in a few months.
I think we will do a part two.
Yeah, Bree, take that over.
Look, I even use the time that's usually for me to, plug the OZeWAI stuff. I just threw it in the chat. So that will be up for you later. Yes, do a part 2. I'll book you in, all 3 of you, for sometime next year. Just keep an eye out for your emails. Wonderful session, so many questions, but we do have some other ways that we're considering how to manage questions that are coming through, especially from us, the professionals, ongoing discussions. We're always learning here at OZeWAI, so we're always interested in some ideas to do that. We share on our website ways to get to communities where you can ask more of these questions as well. But yeah, no, keep in touch, join OZeWAI and register for the next session, and we're booking in September, October, November very soon. So subscribe to the newsletter. Ricky will share all the news as soon as it comes out. Thank you, everyone. What a wonderful session again. It just flew past. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Julie. I'll be in touch with you separately.
Please.
And thank you again, Ricky, for a wonderful another moderation session. It just flowed so well. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.